when I get asked from parents, how kids, sometimes they want to wear wigs, sometimes they want to wear hats, sometimes they want to wear scarves, sometimes they want to go natural. And I put an analogy to it and I say, well, in the morning you wake up and decided you're going to wear your red dress. So you could have worn a blue one or you could have worn a green one. You chose the red one. They got up that morning and said, well, this is how I want to be facing the world today. And that's what they did.
This is Alopecia Life with your host, Deanne Graham. You'll hear interviews with specialists in their field and parents who are helping their child move through life while living with alopecia areata, along with conversations with alopecia rock stars who are making a difference. Alopecia Life is here to provide you with support, accurate information, inspiring stories, and life hacks to help you navigate the world of hair loss. Whether you've just been diagnosed or have had it for ages, Alopecia Life has been created to share all the information you may want or need to do alopecia your way.
Welcome to this episode of Alopecia Life. Today, our guest is Chel Campbell, who in 2010, after 12 years of being a parent of a son living with alopecia, led her to create the Australia Alopecia Areata Foundation and build on her passion for unconditional acceptance and appearance diversity. In today's episode, we discuss the how and why behind AAAF, what they are looking to accomplish this year, how they've adjusted their outreach during the pandemic, and how she hopes that one day in the future, there won't be a need for the foundation. You'll hear a lot of laughter during the interview, and we also spend some time acknowledging the sides of alopecia that aren't often talked about. Please be aware that we discuss some mature and potentially triggering topics during this episode. Chel, welcome to Alopecia Life today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is wonderful to have you. We have kind of had a hiatus of chatting with each other in about, I would say it's been about 7 years since we first spoke when I was putting my book together. And I am just so glad to have you on to share about AAAF with our listeners today.
I'm excited as well.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about how you founded AAAF? And when I say I'm using AAAF because it is the way that you guys like to say it, and it's so much easier. So this is the Australia Alopecia Areata Foundation over in Australia, of course. And I just would love to have you share with listeners how it all came about.
So it came about, my son was diagnosed with alopecia areata when he was 18 months old. And when I tried to introduce him into school, there were no support materials to do that. So I started with creating some support materials for him. We did have some local support groups. By the time Ryan got to the age of about 10, the local support groups were run by middle-aged women, and they still had the concept of hiding alopecia, which for a 10-year-old boy really wasn't working out. And so that's when I first started to get the idea that we really need to make alopecia areata more aware within the community. And how would we do that? We weren't going to get that support from that little support group that was there. So I then went and canvassed all the little support groups that were throughout Australia, which there was about 7. All of them more or less had run out of puff. And so collectively we said, why don't we create a new group, and then each of the little support groups can become the support arms underneath that, and we'll have one administrative, area. So that was sort of formed as a consensus. And as you can imagine, as soon as I formed the foundation, they all went, great, someone else has taken up the ball. We're all out of here. And so I ended up with a steering committee and then started everything from scratch. So that was in 2010. And from then to now, we have a support group in every one of our states that's run by what we class as a branch manager, and then they have support people that work within them and assist them. And basically the support groups run face-to-face sort of meetings, local events, engage with the local vendors that we have around the areas. So when I say vendors, it's basically people who provide items into the alopecia world. So it might be pharmaceuticals, it might be hairdressers, it might be wig providers. So I think you get the gist.
Sure.
In regards to that. So that's really why I created the foundation. And we have 3 mission statements. One is to provide awareness into the community. One is to provide support to the individuals and their families. And the last one is to provide funding into medical and psychological research. So everything we do at AAAF has to hit one of those mission statements for us to acknowledge it as an event, something that we're actually going to participate in, something that we're throwing money at.
I love that. Now, when you started this back in 2010, did you kind of have a vision for it, or did it kind of start off where it's saying, okay, I guess we've just got to take over these support groups where everybody kind of ran away from, and was it going to be kind of more local support, or did you anticipate it becoming as big as it is right now?
So I certainly didn't anticipate it becoming as big as it is now, but the vision was so that you could be who you were, as you were, and look however you wanted to be, and not have a stigma around that. So that was my vision. So I talk about unconditional appearance diversity, and everyone should be able to be accepted as they are and how they are, and not judged. That was sort of my internal vision. And everything I sort of did and structured for the foundation was about promoting that awareness, that kindness, removing that stigma that was there. And, if you think about it, even in 2010, men were still doing a comb over, and, women weren't accepted as being bald. You still even didn't have the word diversity. It wasn't a common word that was being used out in the general public. It was certainly not in Australia. So we still had a lot of bullying that was happening, and not just if you had alopecia, all the kids were bullying if there was any type of difference that child had. The schools here worked really hard to integrate children with any sort of difference, and it's rarely heard now in regards to calling it out. The children are just integrated. So a slight, not that I did that, but I still feel we contributed to getting that out there.
I actually want to say you did do that. You absolutely had a huge part in that. And if you never would have started AAAF, it never would have been what it would be, or maybe it would, right? But it would have taken more years, more time to develop all these things. And it sounds like you really had an idea of where you wanted to take it. How did Ryan respond to this when you started something that was kind of, it's a big deal, right? And it's all wrapped around kind of him and also your husband, right?
So it was wrapped around my son. So because my son had already been living with the disease for 10 years as such, we had good family consultations in regards to it, and did highlight the fact that it would put more awareness into him. But he embraced it. He said, look, if it's a passion of yours and it's something that you want to do, go for it. And you'll see on our website, he's the guy in the middle of the site with the two heads together. And those two heads are basically about, thinking, bringing it together is what that image is about. I didn't have a lot of images. So he became the image on our first brochure. He became the image on our website. He would come to all the kids' events and champion all the little kids. And my son was a person that was in control of his own hairstyle from the age of 5, as soon as he could hold clippers. And it was up to him. If he wanted to shave it, he did. If he wanted to have the sprigs of hair that he had, he could. It was totally up to him. But in saying that, he also, when you get to a teenager, you want to fit in. You move from single gender peer groups into multi. And he obviously took a little bit of an emotional hit in trying to move over into that peer group side of things. we did notice that he wore hats more. He would conceal in public more. And when we talked to him about that, it was more about, I just can't be bothered talking about it, Mum. It's not that I'm not accepting of my alopecia or accepting of who I am. He said, at this age group, people just want to ask you and ask you and ask you, and I just can't be bothered. And I took a great lesson from that. And when I get asked from parents, how kids, sometimes they want to wear wigs, sometimes they want to wear hats, sometimes they want to wear scarves, sometimes they want to go natural. And I put an analogy to it, and I say, well, in the morning you wake up and decided you were going to wear your red dress. So you could have worn a blue one or you could have worn a green one. You chose the red one. They got up that morning and said, well, this is how I want to be facing the world today. And that's what they did. You did mention about my husband. My husband has alopecia universalis, and he developed that, however, when he was in his 50s. So he's been living with that about 5 years now, which we had no signs or understanding of him developing alopecia universalis. So, yes, I now have the two of them in my family.
It's super interesting that your husband developed this 5 years ago. And when you reminded me that he had alopecia universalis, I thought, I don't remember talking about that. And so it had happened in between that time frame where we had spoke, and this wasn't part of your family's reality. How did your son, Ryan, and your husband, how did they kind of come together, or did they, or was it kind of like, oh, okay, this is just now a thing that Dad has?
So one morning we were in bed and I looked over at him and I said, you're missing an eyebrow. And he went, oh, am I? And he actually rubbed it and he went, oh, I guess we know what this is then. And as you know, with alopecia universalis, within 6 weeks, you lose everything. And he had lost everything. And I think my kids come around every week, so it maybe would have been the second week that Greg was in the stage of losing all of his hair, and Ryan came in and he said, right, so you're the one that made me have this disease. and he just looked at him and he goes, I've got no outcome for that, have I? and that was it. There's never been, anything else. But it's funny because Greg will now go, I can't keep a beanie on. He said all those years that Ryan would complain that the beanie would slip off and we would go, seriously, just stick it back on your head. He goes, I can't keep this beanie on my head. So, 50 years later, they're sort of having some jokes about the trials and tribulations of what's actually happening. So, yeah.
Right. Even the most simplistic things like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they both sport a baseball cap. You know how at the back they have the little bit that's cut out where girls generally put their ponytail? Yeah. So they've both got a suntan where the top of their head's white and then around their neck is brown and the little bit that's cut out is brown. So
yes, a common thing we see with people with alopecia for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to actually go back a step where you were talking about how Ryan wanted to wear a hat once he kind of hit a different peer group and the emotional hit that he was taking, and how you were initially kind of concerned about that, right? You were saying, well, is he not comfortable? Actually, you actually didn't say that. I'm kind of putting into words of parents that I hear a lot. They're saying, well, they're comfortable at home without a hat, but then they go to school and they wear it, or they're comfortable on a sport team and then they're not comfortable in the classroom without a hat. So that put it into perspective so perfectly. As he said to you, I don't want to talk about this all the time. And so it's not about his comfort with his alopecia. It's more about, we don't want our lives to always be centered around talking about why we're bald, right?
Yep, that's exactly it. There's more things in his life than alopecia, and therefore, talk to me about the fact that I'm good looking. Talk to me about the fact that I've covered in tattoos. Ask me about this tattoo rather than the fact that I've got no hair.
Right. For
him, he's got a really stunning girlfriend, and he'd say, why aren't they looking at her? So, and like Ryan's sister got married in February. and February 2020, and he had his dreadlocks at that stage. Now, to explain Ryan's alopecia, Ryan has 2 patches on one side of his head, 3 patches on the other side. His pattern is aphasis, so he's bald down the centre of his head and around his ears. But he was able to grow the patches, and he grew them out to a long length, and he's done that probably since the age of about 19 and had them as dreadies. So he said to his sister, he said, well, he was in the bridal party on her side, and he said to her, do you want me to shave my head? Do you want me to wear a cap? How do you want it? And she said, Ryan, just be you. She said, I don't care, how you want to present yourself. She said, I'm not having hats on the men's side. The girls aren't wearing hats or anything like that, but if you want to wear a hat, wear a hat. And he came to me and he said, Mum, do you think I should shave my head? And I said, Ryan, it's totally up to you what you want to do. And he goes, yeah, but the photos are going to be on the wall, forever and all the rest of it. Then the next thing I know, he's booked himself into a hairdresser. And he said, can you come with me, Mum? And I said, sure. And he said, because he hadn't been to a hairdresser. Right. I don't think he's ever been to a hairdresser. And we went to the hairdresser, and I said, what are you? He said, I'm getting some more dreadies put in. He said, so it looks like I've got hair. And so he did that. And the week later, he shaved everything off. And I said to him, why'd you do that? And he said, well, I didn't want the focus to be on my bald head at her wedding. I wanted the focus to be on her the whole way through, and I didn't want any of her friends who didn't know me questioning why I didn't have hair. He said, so I tried to normalise it as much as I could for her big day. Yeah, and I thought that was really special.
Yeah, it is really special. And I would say that is a common thing that I hear time and time again, not taking the attention away from the bride. Weddings are a big one for people who are living with alopecia, even if they're not in the wedding party, right? They could be just, a guest of the wedding, and they're still concerned. They don't want any of the attention to come off of the bride, which is a big day for the couple, of course, themselves. So I think that that's really sensitive of your son to be aware of that. And I love that your daughter was just like, do what you want. If you want to wear a hat, even though nobody else is wearing a hat, I want you to be however you feel comfortable. I love that. What would you say you would like to see the future of AAAF become? What are you hoping for?
Well, I'm hoping that AAAF dissolves, and I mean that in a really positive way. With the research that's happening at the moment and the advancements that's happening, and we're seeing quite a lot of advancements and a lot of trials happening in Australia, predominantly around the JAK inhibitors. So we're hoping that the number one treatment that will go into the regime for alopecia areata in Australia will be the JAK inhibitors instead of the cortisone injections, which has been predominantly the winner in Australia. So we are getting really good results. We're now on to our 5th drug that we're trialling in regards to it, and they're starting to get to the point where they're able to predict the dosage based on the pattern of hair loss that individuals have and which drug is best for the individuals in regards to that. So there will always be those individuals that, choose not to go down and have a treatment in regards to it, but those that do go through and have the treatment in regard, they won't need the ongoing support that we provide. So I'm hoping, and it's why I hope sort of it diminishes at some point in the future, and the disease isn't going to be eradicated, but the dependency of it will change over time. Until then, it's baby steps. When I started the foundation, am I the only person with this disease? I can't tell you how many emails I got about that. Whereas the most common email that comes into the foundation these days is there a treatment? What's the success rate of these treatments that are coming through? Do you have support groups? I love the material on your support pages. Don't recall the last time I actually got asked the question, am I the only one with this disease? So to me, that's sort of a bit of proof in the pudding that, one, awareness is getting out there. To Google, good old Google. I mean, it's great to be able to connect people, drives me mad when people self-diagnose and come back with all these weird things, but each to their own. I think for now, it's really about support. We created a couple of new support initiatives through the pandemic. One of them was the No Hair, We Care package. Mm-hmm. We went out to our vendors and asked for their support, which they were just brilliant. They provided us with all different sorts of items. And with that, what we did was we put together a care package and for different age groups. So we've done it for the children, the teens and male and females. And they consist of, hats and scarves, jewellery, facial products, skincare products, dolls, animals, and each time we've run out and I've asked for more, they've been very generous and just donated them and dropped them off. So it is fantastic. So they're roughly, anywhere between about $150 worth of items that they get, and they pay us $16.50 for the postage, is the recipient does. So it's a great way. It's also a great way for when people are new coming into the foundation. We introduce that idea to them if they want that, and we provide them with all of our support material along the way in that pack as well. So it's a great way to sort of connect and get it out there. So depending on, what the world throws at us next, there might be, some other support programs that we put into place. But at the moment, that was sort of our big one. And we have provided over 220 of those packs.
How are people hearing about you guys? Is it other than Google, right? I mean, because sometimes it's really hard to find something. You guys are probably the number one search if somebody were to say alopecia in Australia. But sometimes people don't have those resources, right? And we're hoping that they can get them from their doctor's office. And that's what we always hope is where if it can just start right there and start coming down to you guys, and then the resources are available, then you guys take over from that point to take over those resources.
So on our registration, we have a question like, where did you hear from us? And when we first started that, we never got the box ticked that they got referred to us by a dermatologist. Mm-hmm. Last year, that was our highest percentage as to how people actually heard about us, was a dermatologist. And look, it's been a hard slog, and I won't sugarcoat this at all. It's been a really hard slog to get the dermatologists on board. Yeah. Dermatologists in Australia, there's no glory in curing alopecia areata. There's glory in curing diseases that people die from. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the percentage of dermatologists do not go into hair. We only have 6 dermatologists that specialise and really understand and get into alopecia areata. And most of those have all been trained under one dermatologist, which is Professor Rod Sinclair, who leads the charge in regards to everything hair. Now, he also, he has a practice, and he also does every other dermatological requirement, but he champions hair. And it is through having a really strong relationship with several of the dermatologists that we run open days. And what an open day is at different states, you go there and you talk about alopecia. You have all items on display about alopecia. You have guest speakers that talk about it, people who have lived experiences, but also professional psychologists and also dermatologists. And it's through those events and having them come and speak at those events that they get a real feel for the fact that this is the life of these people, and they champion it, and they see the good that we do, and therefore they continue to recommend our foundation. But even further, peer-to-peer, they go to their own seminars and areas, and I've had several of those dermatologists ask me, can you send me your introductory PowerPoint about what AAAF does, with all the programs that you do, because I'm going away for the weekend with 10 people and I want to, tell them about it, So It's things like that that have been, word of mouth has been fantastic. And when I say hard slop, I have been to every single dermatologist conference, since, 2004 was my first one, right? And I have travelled, I have stood in a booth on my own, and I've had maybe 3 dermatologists, come and see me. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to hold those, and they've been virtual. But prior to that, the last one that I attended, we actually had 38 dermatologists come and see us. And I know that that's such a small amount of people, but, I was actually really excited at the fact that we had come so far. And even better still, we currently have a doctor on our committee who has trained under Professor Rod Sinclair and is currently going through her exams to become a dermatologist. Now, she came on our committee purely because she wanted to understand the disease. She wanted to understand the individuals. She wanted to be able to connect socially with the individuals and the journey that they were going on to make her a better doctor.
Oh, I love this. Is this Vivian?
Yes, this is Vivian.
All right. Okay. I'm looking at your board right now, and I'm super impressed by the people on it, by the way. But I just want to say, like, your excitement on those 38 dermatologists talking to you, I can feel it, and I can totally understand, especially when you're comparing it to 3, right? That, or no one, right? Nobody would come talk to you. Then you've got 3 kind of as your maximum number. And the fact that people are interested when you're doing those open days and they're talking to you, and they're there to understand the patient experience, the lived patient experience. They can hear it, and understanding that we're people. Yeah, we do know that there is, obviously, like you said, their time and attention is being spent on saving lives. We get it. But on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10 at times for us, right?
Yes, absolutely. And Rod Sinclair's been great for us because he actually took the paper, or he wrote the paper. He took the studies that we had done, because we haven't had so much at the moment, teenage boys dying through suicide. And he championed that and took that into the general GP journal for us. All right. And that was just to get it into the general GP's awareness that don't trivialize it. Right. Don't say it's just hair. Don't say, well, you're lucky you're a boy, and things like that. It is reality. It is real, and it is something that, happens. And if you think about it, girls have longer hair, boys have shorter hair. They wake up, it's reality for them that day. Girls tend to have more time to adjust and understand that something is happening. And it may not be a lot longer in time, but it is longer. If you wake up that day with a patch on the top of your head and you've got to go to school, you've got to deal with it that day. Girls can put ponytails. They have long, the story. They have longer hair so they can camouflage it to actually understand what's going on. Yeah. And it is a big difference, and a big psychological difference that everyone, all of our support members, need to understand when they're talking to parents about that.
Yeah. And I love how Dr. Sinclair took that on and made it an issue that was in the forefront of people's minds, because I know for me, when I started to put my book together, they said, people, publishers and things like that, write what you know. And I know women who lose their hair, and I was a child who lost it. So I could speak to that, but I thought I would just focus on women. And then I was in a support group, and a guy was sitting there straight across from me, and he said, yeah, I wanted to die. I wanted to kill myself. And I was like, oh, this is not about the female experience, right? This is about the overall experience of hair loss, no matter who you are and how it's affecting you. And we just don't give enough attention to boys and men in that regard, for sure.
And it's also very hard because the men won't open up and the men won't talk about it. And we've got thousands of people on our support groups. We created a men's support group. We've got under 100 men on that support group, and we would get maybe one post, one question a month. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how much interaction we put in there, you know, we can't get them to open up. We can't get them to provide insight or ideas, you know, that type of stuff. We don't have a men's brochure. We put out a infographic that said about, you know, the 8 things, you know, not to ask people, you know. Mm-hmm. And we went into all of our groups, not just the men's group, but all of our groups, and said, you know, targeting the males within there, give us one thing you don't want people to say to you. And we got 4 responses. So out of 10,000 people, we got like 4 responses. And so it has been really hard for us to get the men engaged. What we are finding is the younger persons that come through the foundation tend to champion it as they get older and stick around. One thing I don't know if you know about AAAF, we're all run by volunteers. Mm-hmm. So our committee of 30, every single one of those people work full-time in paid jobs, and everyone just volunteers for our foundation. To have several of our members that have received 10 years of service certificates and awards from us, I think is a huge accolade in we must be doing something right, and it must be giving something back to our committee people for them to remain engaged. Mm-hmm. And in that, we've had several men that have been on our committee for over 10 years. So, yeah, I don't know why or how we can engage more the male gender.
Yeah, I think that's a question for all groups around the world. I think there is minimal engagement, like you said, with the male population for sure.
I haven't cracked the nut yet. I mean, we've paid for trips to go to walk the Kokoda Trail. You know, we've paid for specific things to try and get the men engaged that are manly things, and they just don't do it. You know, and it's like, at this point of time, I've sort of given up in regards to trying to reward them to come on board or encourage them to come on board, and just sort of going, well, it is what it is. We'll just be here to support you in however we can support you. And sort of left it at that for now.
Yeah, so, I love that. And I do think that they do become more responsive, as like you said, the younger generation coming in and being more open as the years go by. That definitely contributes to, you know, just where we are in the world today in 2022, and how we're able to talk about things a little bit more openly than we were, you know, 11 years ago when you even started AAAF.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely agree.
So I would love to have you share with listeners about your Alopecia Awareness Week.
Yeah, so we participate in International Alopecia Day, which was started in the US but has gone around the world. So we do participate in that, and we try to do things such as, well, we call it alopecia. So go to a pizza place and try to do that around Australia. So it's been a bit hard with the pandemic because each of our different states have been closed down. But we do that and then have photos and encourage individuals to participate in that, holding their own events. But our Alopecia Awareness Week is the middle of November, and part of that is where we hold the open days. We also hold a Boldest Borders morning tea. We also encourage the kids to do crazy hair days on the Friday at their school. But the big one that we do is a kids camp, a national kids camp. Mm-hmm. And that's where we pick a state. We had, before the pandemic, we had 120 children from all around Australia coming to that event. And a perfect opportunity for those kids to meet someone else with alopecia. A lot of regional children have never met anybody. There's no one within their area that they have met. Just to form friendships and to have no cares. We don't really hold, you know, workshops or discussions or things like that at the camps. We just let the kids be friends, kids doing a whole stack of activities. If they want to talk about it, they can talk about it. if they want to be shown how to draw on eyebrows, we show them that. If they want to, we're just there. We have it available and people will be there. If they want to go to that area and do it, they do it. We don't organise, set, at 2 o'clock we're going to do a wig demonstration or anything like that. Mm-hmm. We just have volunteers that are there in an area, and if people want to ask questions, off they go and do it. And that's been a huge success. We get 98% acceptance that they want to come back, 99% that it was the best thing that they'd have ever done in relationship to their alopecia. Mm-hmm. And it's those little comments like that you just go, it's really worth all the hard work that goes into it.
Exactly. I totally get that. Yeah, you want to hear that feedback for sure.
Yeah. So we also do a fair bit of awareness through the Awareness Week and getting onto TVs, media outlets, doing stuff like that, yeah.
Well, I am super excited by everything that's coming in the future and your Awareness Week. I mean, we're already kind of, we still have about 9 more months until that happens, but again, this year, and hopefully it'll be kind of even bigger and more amazing than it's been in past years, especially after this year, last few years with the pandemic. So I know that people are really needing that in-person togetherness again.
Yes, we're seeing that. And last year, because we were still restricted, we held state-by-state camps. Mm-hmm. And although the kids got stuff out of those state-by-state camps, because you were limited by the age groups, like, for example, in Tasmania, we had one 18-year-old, whereas, in Melbourne, we've got 13 18-year-olds. Yeah. So that one 18-year-old didn't get the opportunity to be with the other 18-year-olds. So, look, it did make a big difference. I still thoroughly enjoyed it, but it did make a difference. So we are very keen to hopefully have a national camp again for those kids. So,
yeah, that's exciting. Now, where can people find you when they're looking for you online?
So my go-to is just our website, which is AAAF.org.au. We do have a Facebook page, and we also do have an Instagram account at I couldn't tell you what those hashtags are, Dan.
I will find them and I will put them in the show notes. So.
I'm a shocker in regards to those. So that's why we have a social media lady.
That's right. I love that. You've delegated out the stuff that you don't want to have in your mind. You go, you know what? Somebody else can do that. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, Chel, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today and talking about alopecia, AAAF, your son and your husband. Listeners are going to be really excited to hear this episode.
As I said to you when you asked if I'd be interested in interviewing me, I can talk about it all day, every day. Mm-hmm. So the passion for me is still there.
And that's where it has to be, right? I mean, otherwise it's like you're done with what you're doing. You go, okay, I'm ready to pass this on. So I love that your energy is still there for it.
So thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing your time with Chel and me today. Something really cool that they do and that we talked about off air was their amazing sponsorship program. Each year, they reserve funds to donate to applicants who want to pursue an interest that would otherwise be unachievable without their financial assistance. It's a combination of awareness and empowerment. You can check out past sponsorships over on social media. If you're looking to get in touch with AAAF, Chel's contact information, along with her social media handles, can all be found here in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening. Join our Alopecia Life Facebook group and find out more information at headonlifecoaching.com. The information on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment and is meant for general information purposes only. If you're enjoying these episodes and finding the tips helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to and download podcasts.